Everyone, this is Jeff and Tony Brabeck, our little sparrows. Everyone's fully aware of the days and times that we live in right now, so you can pretty much assume what we're going to be chatting about. The current virus situation. Don't want to say its exact name. Have you been sheltering in place for the last 7 weeks, like we have? Are you experiencing an unexplainable fear of sickness for yourself and your living children? This is a fear that is common among the pregnancy and infant loss community regardless of the current worldwide virus. So it's going to happen no matter what. We're going to have certain fears. In this episode, we will address what many moms of child loss have been feeling during this time of uncertainty, as well as what it looks like to come out of the self-quarantine and face what will undoubtedly be a new normal for most, if not all of us.
Subscribe to Our Little Sparrows and ring that bell to receive alerts when we post new video podcasts weekly. All right, let's get started.
All right, so first we're going to talk about fears. So most of you listening to this episode have probably experienced loss, and this time of quarantine may be bringing up some of those same feelings, memories, or even specific fears that you have.
Absolutely. I know for myself, being in quarantine and hearing all about this virus that we don't really seem to have a real grounding on how to treat and how to respond in terms of like medically wise or physically wise yet at this point. Um, and we're all asked to stay in place at home, shelter in place. And it just feels like everything is kind of out of order. We've been asked to stay home. Some of us have had to adjust to homeschooling our kids, working from home. Some have even lost our jobs. And so it's a sense of everything is out of order. There's a sense of loss of control. And for those of us that have experienced a pregnancy loss or infancy loss, um, something like this can bring up a lot of those memories, old feelings, and it can bring us like flashbacks, perhaps, can come back, and that sense of fear, anxiety can be really overpowering. And my only explanation of what that is that it's because there's a sense of we don't have control of this. We are not in our comfort zones anymore. And so it can bring us back to that time where there was trauma and maybe bring us back to maybe the day that we got the bad news that our baby was not going to survive. Or one of the main fears that I have during this time that it brings up for me is fear of losing another loved one. We have a 4-year-old son named James, and he is our only living child. Our first daughter, Olivia, was the one that died shortly after birth, and we've also had two subsequent miscarriages. So we've experienced a fair amount of loss. And even though each of those situations were very different, they bring back a lot of negative memories for me. And so when this quarantine started happening and we started hearing a lot about this virus that was highly contagious, and I started feeling anxious. And even at the beginning, I didn't even really understand why I felt that anxiousness. Um, I just knew that, you know what, we just needed to respect what we were being told to do and stay home and do the best we can to make sure we're washing our hands all the time and we're not going out unnecessarily. So we've made those adjustments. But even now and then, there's some days that are good and some days that are bad that I have real anxiety about what could potentially happen. And I've had times where I'm really particular, meticulous about groceries or packages that get delivered to our house and making sure that everything's wiped down. And then there's days where I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling confident that maybe this won't affect us personally. And I think sometimes we don't really talk about how situations can bring up those negative feelings that are associated with our losses. And I think maybe it's just a conversation that we need to start having with each other, is how different situations, especially like this one that's of this magnitude, where we are all impacted in some way and it's all completely out of our control, that it can bring up fears of or feelings of just fear, wanting to protect the ones that we have here with us, and almost just kind of going into, I guess I can only think of the word as just a protection mode. I want to do everything I can to make sure that our son does not get this virus, and that we don't get this virus, so that he's, we have to put him someone else's care, while we're having to recover, or hopefully, maybe we have to be hospitalized. And that's just really frightening for me as someone who's already witnessed having to have our daughter um, being put on a ventilator because her lungs weren't working, and she was struggling to breathe. And because this virus attacks the lungs, um, I'm hearing those same words. People need to be put on ventilators, they're being in ICU, um, they're struggling to breathe. And so, um, through all of hearing those stories, it brings back a lot, and remembering what happened to our daughter, and we had to witness that. We had to make the decision to
Mhm.
eventually take her off the ventilator
Mhm.
and just let her pass away.
Mhm. It's
And
different, but it's the same. Yeah.
right, it was a different cause, a different, completely different scenario, but it brings back those same emotions. And it's like I go into this defense mode, that I don't want to have to deal with that ever again. And I don't want anybody else to have to deal with that ever again. And I want to make sure that we are doing what we can
Mhm.
to not have to deal with that. And so sometimes I think people might question our choices in terms of how much we're self isolating and how much we are doing to, make sure that we are not being affected by this virus. This quarantine has really brought up a fear of losing another child or losing another loved one. Now, tell us, what are some of the fears that you may be experiencing during this time of uncertainty? Write in the comments below what you are fearful of.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I would add is that I was somewhat oblivious to everything that you were feeling and thinking about the fears until a couple days ago. Because this last week, everyone's talking about we're going to start getting out of the self quarantine, the stay at home, voluntary stay at home mandates. That's a whole other discussion whether they were voluntary or not. But anyhow, um, I had no idea. I had no idea some of the depth of what you were fearing. Um, and it sucks to realize that even though we feel like a sense of freedom is coming because this self quarantining is being let up over time in stages, and yet there's still going to be restrictions that we should be mindful of whether we're being told to do it or not. So the distancing, what relatives am I going to hang around? How often are we going to expose ourselves? I mean, I can't even begin to think of all the things that we're now responsible for in order to be responsible for what we've always been since our son was born, which is the responsibility for his health. And it that weighs heavy on me now because she said something that I didn't even I mean, I knew, but I not. It's sometimes different when someone says it in such a way that's just it's impactful. It's very specific. These are the things I'm afraid of, Jeff. These are the things that we're gonna have to watch after, and we'll get into that later in the episode a little bit more towards the end. We'll have some tips and some things to be mindful of and follow as suggestions, of course. But yeah, it's like that weighs heavy on me now. and not in a bad way. I think it's just a realization that of the responsibility that we have moving forward, maintaining the health of our family. Let's move into the next topic. I mean, the part of our topic, and we're going to talk about control specifically. So, specifically, loss of control, actually. So, this is what we call grief. I mean, this is part of the grief recovery method that Tony and I are both involved in as specialists. So, we actually walk people through one on one. We also do groups where we go through a process of identifying grief. So the definition that they use and we like to reference all the time is grief is a normal and natural reaction to loss, any loss.
Mhm.
So specifically, right now during the quarantine, there's a lot of loss of a job, loss of finances, loss of a sense of control,
Mhm.
which is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So now you have to ask yourself, okay, I guess I am grieving. Now what do I do with it? Right?
Mhm.
And that's what we're going to get into right now. So we want to obviously take the anxieties, take the loss of the sense of control, and maybe it's a whirlwind feeling, maybe it's just a numbness. There's a lot of different expressions for how people feel when they're going through this. But what we want to do is we want to take that sense of loss of control and we want to bring it back to a sense of being, not necessarily taking the control back, because I think control is a fleeting thing. Do we ever really have full, total control? My personal belief is no. That's where I stand, and that's my belief. So we put it in the perspective of a sense of being, which is a sense of balance per se. That's another way of saying it. So the first thing we'd always say, honor your loss. Sometimes we just need to take a moment and honor our loved one. So for us in our community, the pregnancy and infant loss community, it's obviously how do we honor the loss of our babies? And regardless of quarantine, that's something that's probably always on our minds, especially
Mhm.
when their birthdays come around and
Mhm.
other occasions as such.
Mhm.
So whether it's a moment of a pause to yourself or lighting a candle for your baby, I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of people that do that. There's a national movement about lighting a candle, and we can talk more about that in other episodes. We will for sure. um, or doing a family activity. I know during the quarantine, the sense of loss of like normalcy, right? Pattern of going to bed at a certain time, waking up for work the next day, all that stuff, right? For us, it was doing a lot of projects around the house. It's springtime, our garden, we already have a garden. So we kept with the process, but we did it as a family, and obviously all of us are home to do that. So we purpose to do things, activities around the house such as that. So, I mean, in doing these, we're obviously acknowledging our feelings. So we're acknowledging that we feel a loss of sense of control. Now, what are we going to do about it? So, a great example is picking. I guess they'd be adjectives, right?
Yeah.
We want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think too we need to realize that our feelings can change, moment to moment. So, one day you might be feeling maybe sadness or a sense of loss because maybe it's bringing up a lot of memories from your the loss of your baby or your child. Um, but it's also a sadness because there's maybe a special event that was coming up. Maybe it was a graduation for another one of your children, or maybe it was a family wedding that you were planning
Mm,
or planning to attend, and that all got postponed or
postpone, yeah.
canceled.
Hmm.
And so there's this sense of
It's
loss
not going to
because of
happen,
change.
right?
Yeah. We're not able to see our family and friends as much. That connection that we have, when we're in the presence of physical presence of one another. That is obviously we can't do that anymore with social distancing. So there's a sense of that kind of loss as well. And it's for those that have suffered significantly, maybe financially, um, there's a lot of emotions and that can change from time to time. So I think it's important that we acknowledge our feelings when we're feeling it. And so, an example that I like to share is saying to someone that you trust, that is a safe person for you, you know what, right now I feel sad, or right now I feel
Angry.
angry,
Hmm.
helpless. And I like to include the words right now because it just means that just for right now, this is what I feel.
Hmm.
A little bit later today or tomorrow, I might feel differently.
Hmm.
But we need to acknowledge that what we're feeling sometimes, and just be honest about that with someone that we trust. So we have actually created a worksheet for you, that has a list of many different feelings, a whole range of feelings that you could possibly feel. And it's just something helpful for you to identify maybe what you're feeling. Maybe you're
Hmm.
not really quite sure.
I mean, it's
And you can reference that list and
right.
pick a word that you identify with and say, you know what, I'm feeling really um, helpless
Mhm.
today. Um,
It's a good exercise. That's
yeah.
really all it is. Whether you feel stuck or not in starting a
Hmm.
sentence or completing a sentence like this, I think it's good to read through the list that we're going to provide for you guys of adjectives. So angry, disappointed, sad, mad, all that stuff. You'll find words that like, oh, I didn't even think about that one. But I
Hmm.
definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
So we definitely encourage you guys to download that. It'll be in the link in the show notes below, like Tony said.
Yeah.
So another thing beyond being would be to regain a sense of purpose. So essentially, you're asking yourself, okay, um, I feel a loss of sense of control. How do I get that balance back? And we talked about a sense of being. And
Hmm.
now, once you've got that balance, then what do I do with it? So
Hmm.
now we're talking about action. So do you want to?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to um, kind of maybe reassess maybe what are some goals you might have, or dreams, um, and hopes that you might have. So I think a good question to ask ourselves is, what can I do today? So obviously, in this time of quarantine, we are limited in the places we can go and what we can do outside of our house. So it may not be something, a task or a goal that we can do right now. Maybe it's more of a tangible goal, but maybe it's a change of maybe a mindset. Um, Maybe taking steps to tend to your mental and your emotional well-being. Maybe that is taking time to um, pause, maybe journal, or like I said, I don't know if I said before, but maybe reassess
Hmm.
what some of your goals are. I'm
Well, I
stumbling
like what you
here.
said earlier. Tony said that she would think about, I have feet, my feet are on the ground, I have legs that
Mhm.
are supporting my feet, and then it would bring her back to the present. So part of this is all about, what can I do now? What can I do today? And for today only.
Mhm.
Now we do want to make goals for the future,
Yeah.
but the majority of your goals, if you want to accomplish them, are in the moment and they're for that day. So I hope
Mhm.
does that put it into some perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
journeying about, what do I want to do today to
Mhm.
spend more time with my family? It's like, hello, we have nothing else to
Yeah.
do but spend more time. But then it's like, okay, what kind of quality time, purposeful time?
So it's okay to seek help, additional support from your family or your friends, from your church, seeking help from a mental health professional. A lot of these services are only available online now, but we still think they are a good resource. So,
And
like,
there's little things you can do to make it less work. Like,
mhm,
we just don't take our son, because we have the option. Not everyone does, but we just don't take our son into any stores.
yeah.
So either one of us will run to the store to get whatever we need or whatnot, and then the other one stays home with Jay.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's a lot of different things on your level, different than what's happening in our family, that you could probably do the same and go, oh yeah, I don't have to do everything. If we just do this, it covers a lot of that. And not putting Jay in and around other people right now, it's just easier,
Hmm.
way, way easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I struggle with that at first. I'm like, you're not going to let them go to the grocery store. And it's like, actually, it's a lot easier. So,
Nope.
no.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just for right now. And as things are changing, obviously everyone needs to make those adjustments as needed. So,
Right.
and though yes, we are stepping up certain protocols and cleaning procedures in our household. I think too there is a balance that we are trying to find in not getting overcome with fear
Hmm.
and making decisions based in fear,
Right.
but also being respectful and to the guidelines we are given,
Right.
and just respecting that this virus and the severity that it can have, and that it could wreak havoc, you know, in someone's life so quickly.
Mhm.
So there's that balance. We don't want to live in fear and make rash decisions, but yet we also want to be cautious and be careful.
Mhm.
And whatever that looks like for you
Mhm.
may be different than what it looks like for us.
Mhm.
Um, we just got to do the best with the information that we're given
Right.
and make the decisions that's best for your family. So
In the end, we want you guys to know that there's nothing wrong with what you're experiencing. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions are all valid. We just encourage you to continue to talk with your immediate family in your household about things and keep an open line of communication, of course, is always key. Fears and a sense of losing control, they're fleeting, they're temporary. So know that you may feel one way today and may feel completely different
yeah.
tomorrow. It's not something that you have to do alone. It's definitely not something that you have to bear, all on your shoulders. So we want you guys to know, as always, you are loved. So if you are getting value out of this video, please give it a thumbs up so others can find our little sparrows on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so that you can get alerts when we release our podcast video every Sunday. If you like this episode and want to see another Our Little Sparrows video podcast, go ahead and tap or click on the video above. If you're looking for more in-depth information, we do have a grief series that Tony and I lead. It is called The Pregnancy Journey, Grieving from Diagnosis to the Loss of Your Baby and Beyond. You can tap or click on the video on the bottom. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. Have a great day.